All right, let's dive into what is basically a philosophical detective story. And the stakes? They couldn't be higher. We're on the hunt for the ultimate foundation of, well, everything we think we know, from science to morality. We're digging into the work, the necessary ground of truth, to ask one huge question. What's holding it all together?
And this is it. This is the big one. The question that drives this entire investigation. What is truth actually built on? What's holding it all up? On the surface, it seems pretty simple, right? Every single belief we have, every fact we think we know, it stands on something else. A reason, a bit of evidence, maybe another belief. You can think of knowledge like a building. It has to have a foundation. Okay, but what happens when you keep digging? When you keep asking, yeah, but what supports that? Eventually, you have to hit rock bottom. And that leads us to the ultimate question. What's standing at the very, very bottom? What's the one thing holding everything else up that doesn't need anything to hold it up? You know, any good investigation starts by clearing the board. So before we start looking for what the ground of truth is, we first need to get a really clear idea of what our source material argues it absolutely cannot be. So right off the bat, the source material tosses out a few of the usual suspects. First, it can't be epistemic. That just means it can't be about how we know things, because that's part of the building, not the bedrock. It also can't be some abstract principle, like a mathematical formula. A formula can describe reality, sure, but it doesn't ground it. And finally, it can't be us, the people doing the knowing, because that would just make truth completely subjective. So with those false leads out of the way, the real question pops up. What's left? Okay, this is where the real detective work kicks off. We are going to build a profile of our target, this ground of truth, by uncovering 4 essential clues, 4 characteristics it absolutely has to have. So, our first clue is that this ground can't be derived from anything else. And I mean, think about it. If the foundation depends on something else for its own existence, then it's not really the foundation, is it? It's just another link in the chain. This thing has to exist all on its own. It has to be the anchor, not the chain. And clue number 2 builds right on top of that. The ground can't be abstract. A pattern or a law of physics can describe what's happening, but it can't obligate you. It doesn't demand anything from you. But truth has a claim on you, right? So whatever this foundation is, it has to be something that can actively mean something, not just exist as a cold, hard formula. And here's where the stakes get really high. Clue number 3, the ground cannot be contingent. That means it can't be something that just happens to be the case, like one possibility out of many. No, it has to be necessary. It has to be something that could not have been any other way. And you can probably see why this is so important. If the foundation of truth is contingent, if it could have been different, then truth itself becomes nothing more than a social agreement, just a convention we all decided on. The whole idea of truth just falls apart. The source puts it perfectly with this quote. If truth were contingent, then denying it wouldn't be a betrayal of what is. It would just be a breach of custom. Being wrong would be no different than, say, wearing the wrong outfit to a party. A little weird, sure, but not a fundamental error about reality itself. Our 4th clue for now is that the ground cannot be fragmented. It has to be simple. And simple here is a bit of a technical term. It just means it's not made of other smaller bits and pieces. Because if it were made of parts, well, it would depend on those parts, wouldn't it? And like we learned from our very first clue, the real foundation can't depend on anything. And the fallout from this is, well, it's huge. If the ground is fragmented, then truth itself becomes fragmented. Suddenly, you don't have one single coherent reality. You've got all these competing truths with no ultimate referee to decide between them. The very fact that we believe there is a single truth assumes there's a single unified ground for it. But hold on. A good detective always has to consider alternative theories. Before we jump to any final conclusions, we have to face the most powerful counterargument to this entire line of reasoning, what's known as the Kantian alternative. So here's where the 2 paths diverge. The author we're following argues that the ground of truth has to be a necessary existence out there in the world. But the Kantian view says, not so fast. It suggests that the ground of truth is the necessary structure of our own reason. We're bound by truth simply because that's what it means to be a rational creature. Now, that's a really strong argument. But our source comes back with a killer follow-up question. Okay, maybe the structure of reason is necessary for us, but is the existence of reason itself necessary? If reason just happens to be a thing that exists, but could have not existed, then isn't the whole structure it supports just floating on top of something that might not have been there at all?
All right, we've gathered our clues, we've checked out the false leads, we've even heard the counterargument. It is time to bring it all together. Let's unveil the final profile of the ground of truth based on everything our investigation has turned up.
So let's recap the profile we've built. Whatever this ground of truth is, it has to be 1, not derived from anything else, 2, not an abstract principle, 3, it must be necessary, not contingent, and 4, it must be unified, not fragmented.
But wait, the source says there's one final crucial piece to this puzzle that ties it all together. This ground can't just exist, even in this super special way. It has to be actively meaning-bearing. It has to be the kind of thing that can obligate us, that can address us, that can stand in relation to us.
And there you have it, the completed profile. 5 definitive, non-negotiable traits that any candidate for the ground of truth absolutely must have.
Now, it is so important to understand what we have here. This profile isn't a conclusion. The author isn't pointing a finger and naming the suspect just yet. What we have is a rigorous set of constraints. It's like a philosophical fingerprint. And this brings us to the final, really provocative question the source leaves us with. Looking at this completed profile, something that exists by its own power, something that isn't just an idea but is a source of meaning, something that is necessary and unified, and something that can actively stand in relation to us. Do you recognize it?